Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. This was about 10 years ago, in early 2014. I'm a merchant mariner, and at the time, I was working on an American-flagged car carrier in the engineering department as an oiler. My whole life growing up, I had some rather strange things happen, seen some strange things, felt some things, etc. But this was the first time I'd had it happen on a ship I was working on. I was on the midnight to noon watch with the third engineer. When I was in the middle of my readings one evening, I happened to notice an orange blur in my peripheral vision on the deck below, which was the lowest deck in the engine room. I turned my head and caught just a glimpse of orange overalls walking down the shaft. This wasn't the engineer or anyone else in engineering, as we didn't wear coveralls. Our work outfit consisted of cargo/mechanic pants and whatever shirt we owned. The deck guys, however, did wear orange. So I finished up my reading and walked down to a lower level to find him. I thought maybe it could have been the AB on night watch, but they didn't make rounds in engineering spaces. But whatever. So I went down there, and no one was there. Probably just tired, I thought, and finished my rounds. After finishing up, I turned in the sheet to the third in the control room, then stepped back out to start on a project when I saw the door to the tool room/machine shop flap closed. Again, I thought it was probably just a decky down here to steal a tool or something. So, of course, I went to the shop, and as I entered, the door to the storage room was just closing. I continued to follow, but there was no one in the storage room. The only other way out would be through steering and up onto the main cargo deck. I continued into steering, gave a quick glance around, and again, I found nothing. On my way back out, I glanced into the hydraulics room when I finally saw him. He was facing away from me, looking at a panel, and I almost just walked past. I caught myself mid-step and shouted over the sound of the steering pumps to get his attention. The man jumped and was turning around when the ship lost power. Losing power was nothing new. This ship had a faulty shaft generator for a while. It was pretty standard. I didn't think anything of it until I got my flashlight out of my pocket, and the man was gone. Like, he was never there. I looked around, but nothing. I was starting to get a little nervous and jumpy at that point. But right before panic could set in, the diesel generators kicked in, and the lights were restored. I returned to the control room. I asked the third if a decky had left the engine room through there. He said no. A few days later, I was talking with the bosun's mate in the deck locker when I noticed a picture hanging, almost as if it were a memorial. I asked him about it. The bosun said it had been there for a while. The ship used to be Swedish flagged, and they had a death aboard back then, before it became US flagged. I sort of went quiet. Then I told him what I saw a few days ago. And he just goes, "Oh yeah, we catch glimpses of him roaming around the cargo deck sometimes too." I didn't have anything else happen that trip, and we even got the shaft generator fixed in the next port. But still, it was sort of wild having that happen in the last place I'd ever expect. The ocean used to be my favorite place until last summer when I almost drowned. Growing up, my parents would take my brother and me to a small reef where we would swim and snorkel all day. Now that I'm an adult, I occasionally take friends out to do the same thing, only with the addition of alcohol. The boat ride is only 40 minutes from shore, and we've never seen a shark out there. We rarely even saw other people. On this particular day, it was just me and my girlfriend, and this was already pretty routine for us. As usual, we were snorkeling, screwing around, when she noticed a baby sea turtle with a fishing line trailing behind it. This is a sadly common occurrence, and we couldn't just leave it that way. Sometimes they get tangled in a net or get so wrapped up that you have to cut through thick layers. So I always keep a good knife on me while in the water. The turtle was making its way to the deeper parts of the reef, so I took a deep breath and hurried after it while my girlfriend waited at the surface. I caught the little guy just as he tried to crawl into a dark crevice near the sea floor. Luckily, the fishing line was easy to remove, and I sent him on his way without needing to go up for air. But I was at my limit. I stepped onto a large rock and pushed off to speed my ascent. As I began to slow, I glanced down just in time to see a massive brown tentacle shoot out of the reef wall and wrap around my leg. It looked like the reef itself had come to life. The tentacle was double the thickness of my thigh, and in a split second, it wrapped my leg from ankle to knee. It took all of my self-restraint not to scream out what precious oxygen I had left. That's when I noticed a huge section of the reef wall moving, and I saw its eyes open. It was like a giant monster octopus, perfectly camouflaged to match its surroundings. I could have stared at that spot all day and never noticed anything unusual if it hadn't grabbed me. My leg was completely numb. My lungs were on fire. I knew that I would lose any slim chance of survival if I started choking. So I took my knife and began desperately stabbing at the tentacle. Black ink instantly spread through the water, and I heard a shrill scream that, to this day, I still can't be sure if it belonged to the giant octopus or my girlfriend. It was around that time that she saw the black ink spreading from the surface and came to see what was happening. I didn't see her. I only felt a sharp tug on the back of my shirt as she was pulling me to the surface. We didn't stick around to look for the octopus. We just hurried onto the boat and got away from that place. Only after we gained some distance did I stop to explain what happened and look at my leg. I stabbed myself twice and had to get over 30 stitches afterward. But aside from that and a touch of PTSD, I was fine. Obviously, we've never gone back and don't intend to, but I just have to know. Has anyone else seen an octopus that size? Was it even an octopus? Could it have been something else? This happened to my grandfather, and given that he's older than dirt, I'm typing it up for him as he tells it. Around January of 1988. I went to work for a company called MUSC, Maritime and Underwater Security Consultants. US-based, but most of our operations were over in Indonesia. Basically, big freight companies wanted protection from local pirates. However, many simply weren't willing to pay the price and would choose to rely on the Navy. Which, son, let me tell you, after almost 16 years in the Navy, I learned a big thing. It's slow as hell. From South Korea to the Philippines, into Indonesia, and then on to Australia before making the journey home, the boys and I, 16 security personnel total, were stuck with a crew of about 50 Norwegians. And really, the captain was the only one who knew a lick of decent English. We were passing through the Makassar Strait at around 0130. Dark as hell. The ocean was quiet. We'd advised the captain that sailing through this particular stretch of sea at night would increase our fee a shit ton. It was, honestly, the dumbest idea to ever come out of that sucker's mouth. There had been 3 attacks on different merchant vessels the night prior. Nonetheless, in this man's infinite wisdom and wallet, he directed the crew to steam through. So, us educated Yankee folk went to the upper decks and got ready for what was destined to be one hell of a night. Assault rifles, Kevlar, light machine guns, fire hoses, the whole kaboom. Full 360 security too. Most of the boys I was with were prior Navy, with some, even if limited, combat experience. So we were pretty confident that we'd be able to handle some pirates armed with AKs. For the first hour and a half, everything was quiet. But it's that Q word that always lands people in trouble. Come up on the second hour, we received a distress call from another vessel about a mile away from us. The contract with this particular employer included terms that we had to render aid to other vessels in need for a fee adjustment. The captain directed our CO to send a few boys via RHIB over to this other vessel. So the course was adjusted. We got within 200 yards of the ship, and the RHIB was being loaded up. Guess who got to go over? Myself and 5 others. This other freighter wasn't responding to hails or light signals. We were going in dark. We loaded up and crossed the eerily dark and choppy sea, shot boarding grapples, and climbed up. Now son, you know how I feel about the next part. So I'm gonna save some of the details. We cleared the bridge. Nobody was there. We cleared the crew quarters. Nobody was there. We cleared the lower decks. Nobody was there. Eventually, we got to the engine compartments. We saw death. About 10 or 15 men had been cut up, shot, absolutely torn to bits, as if they'd been thrown into a blender. Limbs and feces lay about the room. It was absolutely disgusting. Turns out we'd stumbled across a kidnapping gone wrong. Some of the crew had fought back, so the local pirates dealt with them. Took the remainder of the crew for ransom. Funny enough, our CO told us later that MUSC was the KNR company that retrieved them. Grandpa has dementia, but this is one story that he's told consistently for the better part of his life. So, Mr. Pirate Folk, assuming you're all dead now. Or at least, I hope you are. My grandpa spent his life on fishing boats in the North Sea, and he passed down a lot of stories before his stroke in 2016. Most of them involved giant waves, sinking ships, or piracy, but there was one instance he only spoke of a few times. If you aren't familiar with the North Sea, it's among the most dangerous bodies of water in the world. Grandpa worked on one of the larger boats. Even the biggest got tossed around like toys. Severe storms appeared suddenly and unpredictably. The waves were so violent that the men were thrown about the ship without warning. Broken bones and concussions were just routine hazards of the job. Of course, that was nothing compared to falling overboard. That's why any man walking on the deck was tethered to a safety line. The day in question was one of the rare brighter days, but those came with their own dangers. Pirates were far more active on those occasions. Grandpa was one of the men posted to keep watch while the others brought in the nets. These giant nets were lifted with a crane and capable of supporting more than 1,000 pounds, so we're talking durable stuff here. But this time, it only rose a few feet before coming to a grinding halt. Grandpa had a better view from his position, but even he could only see the line disappearing beneath the surface. The crane was under too much strain and quickly switched off, but the awful grinding noise didn't stop. Next, the line suddenly went slack. The net was rising again, but only for a second. Then it went tight with great force and seemed to be pulled out to sea. The ship was dragged behind it for a short distance before the line fell slack again. While most of the crew were distracted with bringing in the net, my grandpa and 2 others were still watching the water. They saw a giant ripple appear. It was more than 3 times the length of the boat as something began rising to the surface. Grandpa thought that he was about to see some kind of military submarine, but instead, it was a fishtail half the size of a blue whale. Not that you typically see blue whales in the North Sea, but it's supposed to be the largest creature in the world. Yet here was something that had an equally large tail, possibly bigger. Only the thinned part emerged, and it quickly disappeared again with a hard slap that sent a dangerous wave crashing into the side of the ship. You never want a wave to hit you from the side. They're lucky it didn't take them down, but it did knock Grandpa from his post. If not for the safety line, I would have probably never been born. When order was finally restored, the empty net was pulled back onto the boat. Something had ripped it apart. The ends hadn't been cut or chewed through. They had been pulled apart by brute force. Men who spend their lives at sea tend to be a superstitious bunch, and these guys were no different. By the time they learned what Grandpa and the other 2 witnessed, they were all ready to sail back to port, even though they had 3 weeks left on the hitch. I guess a lot of people would find a new profession, but there weren't a lot of job opportunities in my family's area, so my grandfather spent another 30 years at sea before finally retiring. It was a common lifestyle where they were from. My dad moved to the US for college, where he met my mother, and we've been in Illinois ever since. I don't put much stock into ghosts or monsters, but we don't know what the hell might be out there in the oceans. I don't play when it comes to that stuff. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.